Hi, it's Daniil Belov again, and this is my series of lessons on how to draw shading. Often, a complex form can be represented as a set of simple geometric forms. For example, this jar. Its neck can be represented as a cylinder. That means that actually this is a cylinder. Of course, it's not ideally straight. Here it smoothly transits into the shoulders of the jar, but as a whole, it's all the same, a cylinder. And the shading on this form is displaced in the same way as on a cylinder. If I take a lamp and move it, you'll be able to see that. Here is a cylinder nearby, so you can compare. It's practically the same thing. This part of the jar can be represented as a part of a sphere, and the shading on this part of the jar is also distributed by the same principle as on a sphere. This part of the jar can be represented as a truncated cone, and the shading on this part is distributed by the same principle as on a truncated cone. Here, look at how you can use this knowledge in practice. For example, you want to draw some object, like this one. It's easy to see a parallelepiped in it. A parallelepiped is a prolonged cube. This box is literally a parallelepiped. Look, it has these surfaces, the flat surfaces which intersect each other at a right angle, and these surfaces, they are directed towards the light source at various angles. This one is directed towards the light source, it's the lightest surface. This surface turns away from the light source a bit, so it becomes darker. And this surface turns away from the light source more and becomes even darker. These forms also have several surfaces. These surfaces are such flattened forms. They have this flat surface, and they have a thickness. It's also a surface. The thickness is a flat surface too. The top surface and the thickness surface intersect each other at a right angle, so they are directed towards the light source at different angles. One surface is directed like this and the other is directed like this. They are directed towards the light differently, so they have a different degree of lighting. This thing is actually also a parallelepiped, but it has these cutoffs. Here are the cuts. Here it's curved a bit, and here it's curved too. And in general, the lighting is distributed on it in the same way as on a parallelepiped, but with these small differences. In this case, you need to understand that in these places, here, here and here, the change in the direction of the surface happens. This surface is directed towards the light more than this surface. That's why it's lighter than this surface. And this form is also quite complex, but actually the idea is the same. We have surfaces which are directed differently towards the light source. For example, this surface is turned towards the light source more than this surface or this surface. That's why it's lighter than these surfaces. And please pay attention that on this form the surfaces change not only like this, this and this, but also in this direction. That is, here not only is this surface darker than this surface, but this area is also darker than this area. That means that the surfaces which you can imagine here, many small surfaces, all become darker than these surfaces. In other words, roughly speaking, it's the same as on this form. Thanks to knowing that, you will be able to draw objects like this. I mean, some real objects, not just abstract cubes and cylinders, but some forms like this. On my site I've posted photos of various geometric forms with various lighting. If you can understand the principle deeply, I mean the principle of the distribution of shading on forms, the idea that they consist of surfaces, the fact they are directed in various ways towards light, you will be able to draw, in principle, any object, especially if you know its construction. In the beginning, I suggest you just train with some simple geometric forms like cubes and cylinders. It will be good if you can draw them yourself from memory. You will understand the principles better and you will be able to imagine shading without any problem. When we want to draw a complicated form, sometimes it's not enough to simply look at it and search for simple geometric forms. For example, if we look at this part of the hand, you might think, yep, it looks close to a cylinder, so let's draw a cylinder. And you will draw a cylinder and it will look like a sausage. Actually, this form is much more complicated than a cylinder. It's more like this form. Look how the shading on this form is distributed. Now these surfaces are directed towards the light, so they are lighter. Yes, this part of the form is generally similar to a cylinder. But look, if I turn it towards the light, look how abruptly this part of the form becomes lighter. This part. When I turn it away, it abruptly plunges into shadow. And this happens despite the fact that this form is not flat, like the side of a cube. It's curved, it gradually changes its direction. But all the same, its surface changes direction more gradually than here. That's why this happens. The abrupt change in the form is where the lightness changes more abruptly. It happens somewhere in these areas, here and here. And when we try to draw a hand, or when we draw a human, probably a head, a portrait, we need to understand that those forms are very complex. And they are not just a group of cylinders, but they are complex forms with a specific geometry. And for example, a hand, this part is one form, and this part is another form. And in some places these forms join. Moreover, in this position of the hand there is one form, and in this position the form is different. And to depict the hand convincingly, we need to know its construction, which surfaces it consists of, where they change their direction abruptly, how these surfaces are directed towards the light source, and how they turn away. That's why in art schools future artists are learning surface anatomy, which is actually the construction of the human body. How the bones, muscles, skin make up the forms of the human body. This combination is not just amorphous and random, it's quite strict. Actually, it's pretty similar for all people. Certainly, it depends on each individual. Someone can be a muscle man, someone can be thin, someone can be chubby. All this certainly has its own influence, but in general the construction is the same for all people. In the comments, give us some examples of what simple forms you could use to represent the objects that surround us, and what kind of objects can be represented by the simple forms. And it would be great if you could send pictures of objects you've drawn by breaking them down into geometric figures. Don't forget to look at the additional materials for the lesson on my site. There is a lot of useful content. In the next episode I'll tell you how to draw objects that consist of a lot of details. For example, how to draw trees. And of course, if you want me to do more lessons, become my patron on patreon.com.